My name is Lavern Mitchell. I'm 32 years old and I'm an architectural designer in Boston, Massachusetts. And I need to tell you about the day that was supposed to be the happiest day of my life. The day I married the man I thought I loved, the man I thought would help me build a future. But instead, it became the day I watched my brand new husband and his mother try to drug me, steal my inheritance, and lock me away in a conservatorship at our own wedding reception. At our wedding, I saw my husband drop something into my champagne through a hidden camera I'd installed. I swapped our glasses. When he raised the toast and drank, I signaled the videographer, and 200 guests watched on the ballroom screens as the footage played in real time showing exactly what he'd done. What I discovered that night would expose a conspiracy so calculated, so rehearsed, so heartless that even now, 18 months later, I still check my drinks twice before taking a sip. Remembering the moment I realized the man standing next to me in a tuxedo, the man who had just promised to protect me in sickness and in health, had been planning to sedate me into silence and make me disappear. And he'd been counting down to this moment for months. Before I continue with this story, I need you to do something for me. Please hit that like button and subscribe to this channel. And I really mean this. Comment below if you've ever had a gut feeling that saved your life, because I need to know I'm not the only one. I need to know that there are other people out there who understand what it's like to realize the person sleeping next to you every night has been studying you like a blueprint, searching for your weaknesses, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Because what happened next exposed a web of lies so deep, it made me question every single moment of the 3 years I'd spent with this man. Let me take you back to the beginning because you need to understand who I was before that champagne glass changed everything. I met Ross Simons 3 years before our wedding. I was 29. He was 31, and we met at an architecture showcase in downtown Boston, where I was presenting a sustainable housing project I designed for a nonprofit development firm. He was there with his mother, Emily Simons, supposedly looking at properties for investment purposes. He approached me after my presentation in his perfectly tailored charcoal suit, and he had this way of looking at you like you were the only person in the room who mattered. We talked for what felt like minutes but turned out to be over an hour. He asked intelligent questions about my work, about the challenges of designing affordable housing that didn't sacrifice beauty for budget, about my vision for sustainable architecture in urban spaces. He told me about his work in commercial real estate, about how he'd grown up in Connecticut in what he called old money circles, and how he wanted to use his family connections to make a real difference in the community. He seemed thoughtful, cultured, passionate about leaving a legacy. He quoted Frank Lloyd Wright and asked me about my favorite buildings in Boston. He seemed like someone who understood that structures aren't just about walls and roofs, they're about creating spaces where people can build lives. We dated for a year before he proposed. And I mean a real relationship, gallery openings where we debate modern versus classical design, weekend trips to tour historic buildings in Newport and Philadelphia, long dinners where he'd sketch ideas for our dream home on napkins. He integrated himself into every corner of my life. I need to tell you something important about my background because it's crucial to understanding why Ross targeted me. I'd lost both my parents in a car accident when I was 26, just before I'd really established my career. My father had been a civil engineer, my mother a museum curator. They left me the family home in Cambridge, a beautiful Victorian that my father had restored himself, along with a trust fund that gave me the financial freedom to be selective about my projects and focus on meaningful work instead of chasing corporate contracts. I was still healing from that loss when I met Ross, still trying to figure out who I was without them. And Ross seemed to understand that grief in a way no one else had. He'd hold me when I had bad days. He'd visit my parents' graves with me on their birthdays. He told me he wanted to help me honor their legacy, to build something beautiful together, to create the family I'd lost. Everyone around me loved Ross. My best friend Claire, who is the most skeptical person I know and had disliked every man I'd ever brought around, actually pulled me aside after meeting him the third time and said, "Lavern, this man looks at you like you hung the moon. Don't let this one go." My late father's business partner Martin, who had become like a protective uncle to me, actually shook Ross's hand at our engagement party and said he was relieved I'd found someone who could take care of me. My colleagues at the firm couldn't stop talking about how charming he was when he'd bring lunch to the office, how he always remembered everyone's names, how he'd ask about their projects. The proposal was perfect. He took me to the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum, my mother's favorite place in Boston, during a private evening viewing he'd somehow arranged. He got down on one knee in the courtyard under the skylight, pulled out his grandmother's emerald ring, and told me he wanted to spend the rest of his life building a legacy with me, filling the empty rooms of my heart the way my father had filled that Victorian house with love and light. I said yes. Of course I said yes. Why wouldn't I? Now let me tell you about Emily Simons, Ross's mother. And I need you to understand something. Emily wasn't the stereotype of the overbearing mother-in-law, who just doesn't think anyone is good enough for her son. Emily was calculated, strategic. And looking back now, I realize she was the real architect of the entire plan. When I first met Emily, about a month after Ross and I started dating, she seemed elegant and sophisticated. She invited me to tea at their family home in Brookline, this gorgeous colonial with manicured gardens and furniture that looked like it belonged in a museum. She showed me photo albums of the Simons family history, told me stories about Ross as a little boy, and how she'd always known he'd marry someone special. "You're exactly what our family needs," she told me that first day, squeezing my hand across the tea table. "Someone with intelligence, with taste, with her own accomplishments. Ross has dated so many shallow girls who only cared about the Simons name. But you're different." At the time I thought she was being kind, welcoming. Now I realize she was sizing me up like a property appraisal, calculating my net worth, planning how to acquire me. As the wedding planning began, Emily insisted on being involved in everything. And I mean everything. She wanted to review the guest list, the seating chart, the menu, the timeline for the reception. First, I thought she was just being helpful. She'd say things like, "You don't have your mother anymore, sweetheart. So let me step in and give you that experience. Every bride needs a mother figure for her wedding day." How could I say no to that? I'd lost my mom. And here was this woman offering to fill that void. Felt like a gift. But then I started noticing strange things. Emily would ask very specific questions about my trust fund, about who managed my parents' estate, about whether I had a will, about what would happen to my assets if something happened to me. She'd frame these questions as concern. "You're getting married now, dear. You need to think about these things. What if something happened to you? You'd want Ross to be taken care of, wouldn't you?" And she was obsessed with my family home. She'd visit with Ross and walk through every room, asking about the property value, about the neighborhood appreciation rates, about whether I'd ever considered selling. She'd comment on how much maintenance old Victorians required, how I must spend a fortune on upkeep, how exhausting it must be for someone with my demanding career. "You could sell it and buy something more modern," she suggested more than once. "Something that doesn't drain your resources. You and Ross could start fresh together." But that house was all I had left of my parents. My father had spent years restoring it, working on it every weekend, teaching me about structure and stability and how to build something that lasts. I couldn't sell it. I wouldn't. Emily would smile when I said this, but I'd catch this look in her eyes. This cold calculation. Like she was adjusting a blueprint in her mind. About 6 months before the wedding, Emily started bringing up the idea of me adding Ross to the deed of the house. "Just for protection, dear. Marriage is a partnership. And God forbid something happened to you, you'd want him to have security, wouldn't you? It's what your parents would have wanted, knowing you were taken care of." I told her I'd think about it. But something in my gut said no. My father's voice in my head, the lessons he'd taught me about protecting your foundation, about never compromising the structural integrity of something you've built. Emily didn't like that answer. I could see it in the way her smile tightened, the way she looked at Ross like they were having a silent conversation I wasn't part of. About 3 months before the wedding, things started getting weird. And I mean really weird. Ross began acting differently, more distant, more irritable, and he started questioning everything I did. If I worked late at the office, he'd call multiple times asking where I was, who I was with, why I wasn't home yet. If I mentioned feeling tired or stressed, he'd jump on it. "You're working too hard, Lavern. You're burning yourself out. Maybe you should take some time off. Maybe you should see someone about your stress levels." One night, I came home and found him going through my desk drawer where I kept my parents' documents. Financial statements, property records, insurance policies. He claimed he was looking for a pen, but I knew my father had taught me to be observant, to notice when things were out of place. "Why were you really going through my things?" I asked him. He looked at me like I was crazy. "I told you I needed a pen. Why are you so paranoid lately? You've been acting really strange, Lavern. Your colleagues have mentioned it too." That made me freeze. "What do you mean my colleagues mentioned it?" "I stopped by your office yesterday to surprise you with lunch, and Sarah mentioned you seem distracted lately. Anxious. Not yourself." He came closer, putting his hands on my shoulders. "I'm worried about you, babe. Really worried. Maybe all this wedding stress is too much. Maybe we should postpone." But I hadn't been distracted. I'd been fine. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized Ross had been showing up at my office a lot lately, having private conversations with my coworkers, painting this picture of me as someone who was falling apart. Then came the incident with the vial. It was about 6 weeks before the wedding. I was borrowing Ross's car because mine was in the shop, and I dropped my phone in the gap between the seat and the center console. When I reached down to get it, my hand hit something small and cylindrical. I pulled it out and found a glass vial with a prescription label. The name on the label wasn't Ross's. It was someone named Patricia Chun. The medication was lorazepam, a powerful sedative. The prescription was dated 3 days earlier. I confronted Ross that night. Who is Patricia Chun? And why do you have her prescription medication in your car? He looked startled for just a second, then smoothed it over. Oh, that. Patricia is one of my clients. Elderly woman. She dropped it in my car when I gave her a ride to a property showing. I keep forgetting to return it to her. Why would your client be riding in your car? Don't you usually meet clients at properties? Lavern, seriously, you're doing it again. Getting paranoid about nothing. This is exactly what I'm talking about. You're seeing conspiracies everywhere. It's not healthy. Maybe you should talk to someone. A therapist. Before the wedding, he turned it around on me. Made me question what I'd seen with my own eyes. Made me feel like I was the one losing my mind. But I'm an architect. My father trained me to trust measurements, to trust data, to document everything. So I took a photo of that vial before Ross could take it back. I didn't know why I needed it. I just knew I did. Looking back now, I realize Ross and Emily were laying the groundwork. Creating a paper trail of me being unstable, paranoid, anxious. Building a case that would support their plan to have me declared mentally incompetent after they drugged me at the wedding. They were methodical, careful, strategic. But they forgot one thing. Architects are methodical too. We plan for structural failures. We build in safety measures. We never trust a building until we've stress tested it. And I was about to stress test my marriage before it even began. 3 weeks before the wedding, I made a decision that would save my life. I installed a hidden camera at the reception venue. And before you judge me, before you think I was being paranoid like Ross kept saying, let me explain. My father was an engineer. He taught me that the most dangerous failures are the ones you don't see coming. The structural weaknesses hidden behind pretty facades. He always said, hope for the best, Lavern, but engineer for the worst. I'd been feeling this growing sense of unease I couldn't shake. The incident with the vial. Ross's constant suggestions that I was mentally unstable. Emily's obsession with my finances and property. The way they'd look at each other when they thought I wasn't watching, like they were sharing a secret language. So I told myself I was being cautious, careful, just making sure our gifts would be safe during the reception. I ordered a small nanny cam designed to look like a phone charger and visited the venue, the historic Fairmont Hotel in downtown Boston, 2 weeks before the wedding. I told the event coordinator I needed to check some technical details for my photographer. While I was there, I positioned the camera on the gift table with a clear view of the head table where Ross and I would be sitting. The angle was perfect. It could capture anyone who approached the gift table, but it also had a direct line of sight to our champagne glasses. The camera had a motion sensor feature that would send alerts to my phone. I told myself I was being overly cautious, that I'd watch the reception video later and laugh at my own paranoia, that I'd delete the footage and never tell Ross I doubted him. But my father's voice kept echoing in my head. The difference between a building that stands and a building that falls, Lavern, is attention to the details everyone else overlooks. I also did something else that week. Something I didn't tell anyone. I went to see a lawyer. Not the family lawyer who'd handled my parents' estate. A new lawyer. Someone Ross and Emily didn't know. I told her everything. The vial. Emily's questions about my assets. Ross's gaslighting. The way I was being painted as mentally unstable. I asked her what kind of legal protections I could put in place. She looked at me very seriously and said, Lavern, I hope I'm wrong, but what you're describing sounds like someone laying groundwork for a conservatorship case. If you were to have a medical emergency, especially a mental health crisis, and you're married, your spouse becomes your default medical decision maker. If he claimed you were a danger to yourself, he could have you committed for evaluation. And with a paper trail of instability, she didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. We drew up documents that day. A medical power of attorney naming my friend Claire and my father's partner Martin as my healthcare proxies, not Ross. A document stating I was of sound mind and explicitly opposing any conservatorship. Instructions that if I was hospitalized, these specific people had to be notified immediately. I put these documents in a safe deposit box and gave copies to Claire and Martin in sealed envelopes with instructions to open them only if something happened to me. Claire was worried when I handed her the envelope. Lavern, what's going on? You're scaring me. Probably nothing, I told her. I'm probably just being paranoid like Ross says. But if I'm not, I need to know someone has my back. She hugged me tight. Always. You know that. The week before the wedding I did one more thing. I called my father's old friend who was a retired detective. I told him about the vial, about my concerns. I asked him what lorazepam could be used for. It's a powerful sedative, he told me. Benzodiazepine class. Fast-acting. In high enough doses it could incapacitate someone pretty quickly. Make them appear confused, disoriented. If you wanted someone to look like they were having a mental health crisis. He trailed off, then asked, Lavern, are you safe? Do you need help? I don't know, I said honestly. But I'm taking precautions. And if something happens at my wedding, if I end up hospitalized or something goes wrong, I need you to ask questions. Don't let anyone write it off as a bride having a breakdown. Promise me. He promised. I went into my wedding with a hidden camera, legal protections, and people on standby. My father had taught me to engineer for the worst. I just never imagined how right he was. The morning of my wedding day was perfect. October in Boston, the leaves turning gold and crimson, crisp air that smelled like autumn and new beginnings. I woke up in the bridal suite at the Fairmont, surrounded by my bridesmaids, and for a moment, I let myself believe I'd been wrong about everything. Maybe I was just stressed. Maybe the paranoia was real. Maybe Ross loved me and this was going to be the happiest day of my life. The ceremony was beautiful. I walked down the aisle of the hotel's grand ballroom, past 200 guests, toward Ross who was waiting at the altar looking perfect in his tuxedo. Emily sat in the front row in her designer gown, dabbing at her eyes with a handkerchief. Ross said his vows without stumbling. I said mine. We kissed. Everyone applauded. For those few moments I felt like maybe I'd imagined all the red flags. Maybe I was the problem. Maybe love really did conquer all. The ceremony ended at 5 p.m. We had an hour scheduled for photos while the ballroom was being reset for the reception. I went back to the bridal suite to touch up my makeup and change from my ceremony dress into my reception dress. A simpler but still elegant design that would be easier to move in during the dancing. That's when my phone vibrated. I tucked it into my garter, and the vibration against my thigh made me jump. I pulled it out, expecting a congratulatory text from a guest. Instead, I saw an alert from the hidden camera app. Motion detected. At 5:23 p.m. At the head table. I opened the app with shaking hands. The live feed loaded, grainy but clear enough. And there, on my phone screen, I watched my husband of less than an hour approach the head table where two champagne flutes sat waiting for the grand toast. I watched him look around to make sure no one was watching. I watched him pull something from his pocket. A small vial. The same size as the one I'd found in his car. I watched him twist off the cap. And I watched him tip the contents into my glass. Into my champagne. The glass on the left where the bride always sits. He stirred it with his finger. Put the empty vial back in his pocket. Walked away like nothing had happened. The timestamp read 5:23 p.m. 4 minutes ago. The whole thing took less than 15 seconds. I stood there in my reception dress in the bridal suite, staring at my phone, feeling like the floor had dropped out from under me. My best friend Claire came up behind me. Lavern? You okay? You look pale. I couldn't speak. I just turned the phone toward her and hit replay. We watched it again together. Ross approaching the table. The vial. The pour. The stir. The casual walk away. Claire's hand went to her mouth. Oh my God, Lavern, what? What is he doing? He's trying to drug me, I heard myself say. My voice sounded strange. Distant. Like it was coming from someone else. He's going to drug me at our own wedding reception. My mind was racing. If I drank that champagne, what would happen? I'd get disoriented. Confused. Maybe collapse. And then what? Ross would call an ambulance. Tell them I'd had a breakdown. Use his power as my husband to make medical decisions. Have me committed for psychiatric evaluation. And with the paper trail he'd been building, with Emily backing up every word, with me sedated and unable to defend myself, they'd get everything. The house. The trust fund. Full control over my assets through a conservatorship. And I'd be locked away, declared mentally unfit, with no one believing my side of the story. It was brilliant. Horrible. And it had almost worked. Claire grabbed my shoulders. We need to call the police. Right now. We need to. Wait, I said. Because something was crystallizing in my mind. A plan. If we call the police now, what do we have? A video on my phone that could be dismissed as unclear. A vial with no proof of what was in it. His word against mine. And Ross is charming, Claire. You know how charming he is. He'll say I'm having a breakdown. That I've been unstable. Emily will back him up. And we have 200 guests downstairs who just watched me marry him. So what do you want to do? Claire asked. Her voice was shaking. I looked at my reflection in the mirror, at my wedding dress, at the woman who'd almost become a victim, and I thought about what my father would do. My father who taught me that the best way to expose a structural failure was to apply pressure exactly where the weakness was, to make the flaw undeniable, to document everything. We're going to let him think it worked, I said. And then we're going to show everyone exactly who Ross and Emily Simons really are. I walked into that reception with the camera footage pulled up on my phone, tucked back into my garter where I could feel it against my skin. A reminder that I knew, that I had proof, that I was in control now, not Ross. The ballroom looked like a fairy tale. Candlelight, white flowers, crystal chandeliers. Our 200 guests were already seated, talking and laughing, completely unaware that they were about to witness something very different than a standard wedding reception. Ross met me at the entrance. He took my hand and smiled at me with those perfect white teeth, and I smiled back. I even laughed when he whispered, "You look incredible, Mrs. Simons." Mrs. Simons. The name I would never actually use because this marriage was about to be over before it began. We walked to the head table together. I saw the 2 champagne flutes waiting for us. Mine on the left, his on the right. The liquid in both glasses looked identical. Sparkling. Golden. Harmless. But I knew better. Emily was sitting at the family table just below us, watching with this satisfied smile on her face. Like she'd already won. Like the hard part was over and now she just had to wait for me to drink and collapse. I wondered how long they'd planned this. Months? Years? Had Ross been looking for a wealthy orphan to target all along? Or had he just gotten lucky when he met me? The DJ announced us as husband and wife. Everyone applauded. The salads were served. The first course passed in a blur of conversation and fake smiles while I went over my plan step by step. During the appetizer course, I excused myself to the restroom. Claire followed me. "You're sure about this?" she asked in the bathroom. "Lavern, this is insane. We should just leave. Get you out of here." And then what? He'll say I ran away because I had a breakdown. That I couldn't handle the wedding. Emily will back him up. And they'll come after me with a conservatorship petition anyway. No. The only way to stop this is to expose it. Publicly. Undeniably. With 200 witnesses. I pulled out my phone and sent a text to Michael, the videographer I'd hired for the wedding. Michael owed me a favor. I designed his studio for free the year before when he was just starting out. The text was simple. Change of plans for the reception video. When I give you the signal during the toast, I'll touch my right earring, switch the feed to my phone's live stream. I'm texting you the link now. Don't ask questions. Just trust me. 3 dots appeared. Then, you got it. I also sent a text to my father's detective friend. "It's happening. Be ready." And one to Martin, my father's partner. "Open the envelope. Tonight. After the reception. It'll explain everything." Then Claire and I went back to the reception. The main course was being served. Ross touched my hand across the table. "You seem distracted. Everything okay?" "Perfect," I said. "Just overwhelmed by how beautiful everything is." He squeezed my hand. "It's going to get even better. Wait until the toast." I bet it is, I thought. Emily caught my eye from her table and raised her water glass in my direction. A private salute. A victory lap before the race was even over. After dinner, the DJ announced it was time for the champagne toast. The servers circulated, filling glasses for all the guests. But Ross and I already had our special flutes, the ones at our table. The ones that had been sitting there, unguarded, for the past hour. Ross and I stood. He picked up his glass. The one on the right. I reached for mine, the one on the left that he'd poisoned, and then, as smoothly as my father had taught me to make precise measurements, I picked up Ross's glass instead. It happened so fast, so naturally, that I don't think anyone noticed. In the bustle of us standing, of guests turning to face us, of the lights dimming slightly for the toast, I simply switched our positions. The poison glass was now in front of Ross. The clean glass was in my hand. Ross started his speech. "I'm the luckiest man in the world tonight," he said, his voice carrying across the ballroom. "Lavern is everything I could have asked for in a partner. Beautiful, intelligent, successful. And more than that, she's kind, generous. The kind of woman who makes you want to be better." I smiled up at him, my hand resting on his arm, playing my part. "Today, I'm not just gaining a wife," he continued. "I'm gaining a future. A legacy. Everything we're going to build together." He had no idea how right he was. This was his legacy. This moment. This exposure. "To my beautiful bride," Ross said, raising his glass. Everyone raised theirs. To Lavern. To Lavern, the crowd echoed. Ross brought his glass to his lips. Before he could drink, I reached up and touched my right earring. The signal. The gesture looked natural, like I was self-conscious or adjusting my hair. But across the room Michael got the message. I watched Ross's face as he started to drink. That first sip. And then I turned to the room and said loud enough for everyone to hear. Before we drink, there's something I want everyone to see. The projector screens on both sides of the ballroom, which had been showing our wedding photos during dinner, suddenly changed. The feed switched to the grainy black and white footage from my hidden camera. The timestamp in the corner read 5:23 p.m. Just 90 minutes ago. The room went silent as 200 people watched Ross approach the head table on the screen. Watched him look around. Watched him pull out the vial. Watched him pour something into the left champagne glass. Watched him stir it with his finger and walk away. I let the footage play twice through. No one spoke. No one moved. You could have heard a pin drop in that ballroom. Then I turned to Ross, who had gone absolutely white, the champagne glass frozen halfway to his mouth. "That's my glass you're holding, darling," I said sweetly. "I switched them while you were making your speech. So whatever you put in mine, you're about to drink it yourself." Ross looked at the glass in his hand like it was a snake. His fingers loosened. The crystal shattered on the floor, champagne and whatever drug he'd mixed into it spreading across the white tablecloth. The room erupted. Gasps. Shouts. People standing up trying to see better, trying to understand what they just witnessed. And that's when Ross's legs buckled. He'd already taken that first sip before I'd stopped him. It was enough. He grabbed for the table, missed, and went down hard, hitting the floor beside the broken glass. Emily screamed from her table. She tried to rush toward us, but the crowd had surged forward, everyone trying to see what was happening. "Someone call 911. I heard someone shout, but I already had my phone out. "Already done," I said clearly, my voice carrying across the chaos. "I called them 10 minutes ago. They should be here any moment." The next few minutes were chaos. Pure chaos. Ross was on the floor, conscious but clearly disoriented. His eyes weren't focusing right. His words were slurred when he tried to speak. Guests were crowded around, some trying to help, others filming on their phones, everyone talking at once. Emily was screaming, "What did you do to him? What did you do to my son?" She tried to push through the crowd toward me, her face twisted with rage and terror. "You poisoned him. Someone stop her. She's trying to kill him." But the video was still playing on the screens. On loop now because Michael had set it to repeat. Every few seconds, everyone in that ballroom could watch Ross approach the table, pull out the vial, and pour it into my glass. The evidence was undeniable, playing over and over in high definition for everyone to see. Claire had her arm around me. "You're okay," she kept saying. "You're safe. You did it." My father's partner Martin pushed through the crowd. He'd been sitting near the back with other family friends, and now he looked at me with this mixture of horror and understanding. "The envelope," he said. "That's what this was about." I nodded. "Open it when you get home. It explains everything." The police arrived 6 minutes after Ross collapsed. I'd actually called them 15 minutes before the toast, right after I'd sent the signal to Michael. I told them there was a situation developing at a wedding reception at the Fairmont Hotel, and that I had video evidence of attempted poisoning. 2 officers came through the ballroom doors, followed by paramedics. The crowd parted for them. One officer went straight to Ross, who was now lying on his side, barely responsive. The other came to me. "Ma'am, are you Lavern Mitchell?" "Lavern Simons, technically. For about 2 more hours until I file for annulment." I pulled out my phone. "I have video evidence that my husband attempted to drug me at our wedding reception. That's him on the floor. He drank from the glass he'd poisoned, thinking it was mine." I showed him my phone, the timestamp, the footage. I also have text messages documenting his pattern of gaslighting me over the past few months, emails about his mother pressuring me to sign over property, and I pulled up the photo I'd taken weeks ago, a photo of a prescription sedative I found in his car 3 weeks ago, the same type of vial you'll see in this video. The officer watched the video twice. Then he looked at Ross being loaded onto a stretcher by the paramedics, then back at me. "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to come to the station to make a formal statement." "Of course. But first I need to show you something else." I pulled up my medical power of attorney documents on my phone, where I'd saved them as PDFs. These are documents I had drawn up last week naming alternative medical decision makers. "I'm giving you this because I believe my husband and his mother were planning to have me committed for psychiatric evaluation after drugging me. As my spouse, he would have had legal authority to make those decisions. These documents revoked that authority. The officer's expression changed. You think they were planning a conservatorship? I think they were planning to steal my inheritance by having me declared mentally incompetent. And they almost succeeded. That's when Emily made her move. She'd been standing at the edge of the crowd, and suddenly she lunged forward. Not at me. At my phone. She grabbed for it, trying to knock it out of my hand, trying to destroy the evidence. That video is fake, she screamed. She fabricated it. She's unstable. She's been unstable for months. My son told me. She needs help. She needs to be. The second officer caught Emily's arm. Ma'am, I'm going to need you to step back. You don't understand. She's manipulating all of you. The video is fake. Ross would never. He loves her. He married her. And that's when Emily Simons, in her designer mother of the groom gown, in front of 200 witnesses, in the middle of the Fairmont Hotel ballroom, simply fainted. Her eyes rolled back. Her knees buckled. She went down in a heap of silk and pearls. Someone screamed. The paramedics, who were already loading Ross into a stretcher, rushed over to Emily. I just stood there watching it all unfold like a slow-motion disaster. The ballroom in chaos. Ross being wheeled out on a stretcher. Emily unconscious on the floor. Police taking statements from guests. The video still playing on the screens. And me standing in the middle of it all in my wedding dress, completely calm. Because I'd engineered for this exact scenario. I'd stress-tested the foundation and found it rotten. Now everyone else could see it too. They took Emily out on a stretcher too. The paramedics said it was likely shock and possibly a panic attack. They wanted to take her to the same hospital where Ross was being transported. I almost laughed at that. The two conspirators reunited in the ER. The police asked if I wanted to press charges. Absolutely, I said. Attempted poisoning. Conspiracy to commit fraud. Whatever else fits. I want the full investigation. They collected the broken champagne glass from the floor. They took the clean glass I'd been holding. They photographed everything. They interviewed dozens of guests who'd witnessed the whole thing. Michael gave them a copy of the raw footage from the hidden camera. My friend Claire stayed by my side through all of it. At one point she whispered, "How are you so calm right now? You were almost drugged at your own wedding." I'm not calm, I told her. I'm running on pure adrenaline and rage. But my father taught me that panic makes you weak. Structure keeps you strong. So I'm sticking to the structure I built. The guests started leaving around 9 p.m. Some came up to hug me, to tell me how sorry they were, to say they couldn't believe Ross would do something like that. Others just left quietly, clearly uncomfortable with the whole situation. Martin came to me before he left. "Your father would be proud of you," he said. "The way you handled this. The planning. The execution. He always said you had his mind for seeing problems before they became disasters." "I just wish I'd seen it sooner," I said. "You saw it in time. That's what matters." I left the Fairmont Hotel around 10 p.m., still in my wedding dress, riding in the back of Claire's car. We drove to my house, the Victorian my parents had left me. The house Ross and Emily had wanted so badly to acquire. I stood in the doorway and looked at the home my father had restored. The foundation he'd reinforced. The structure he'd made safe and strong. And I thought about how he'd taught me to do the same for myself. To build a foundation that couldn't be shaken. To engineer for the worst while hoping for the best. I just survived the worst. Now I could start building the best. The aftermath took months to settle. Ross was arrested at the hospital. Once the toxicology reports came back showing low razepam in his system. The same drug from the vial I'd photographed in his car. The same drug he poured into my champagne glass. Emily was charged as an accessory once the police found text messages between her and Ross discussing the plan, and the timeline, and what to do after Elle is committed. They'd been meticulously stupid, documenting their conspiracy in writing. The trial was set for the following spring. But before that, there was the civil lawsuit. My lawyers went after Ross and Emily for attempted fraud, conspiracy, emotional distress, and about 6 other charges I didn't fully understand but supported wholeheartedly. The discovery phase was eye-opening. We found out that Ross had been researching conservatorship for months. He had documents outlining how to have someone declared mentally incompetent. He had emails from Emily discussing which doctors might be sympathetic to their case. He had searched the internet for undetectable sedatives. And how long does lorazepam stay in system? They'd planned everything except for the possibility that I might be planning too. The marriage was annulled within 3 weeks. It turned out that fraud and attempted drugging were pretty solid grounds for annulment. I never had to be Mrs. Simons, Not really. The wedding had happened, but legally it was like it never existed. The Fairmont Hotel refunded the entire cost of the reception. They also offered me free venue rental for any future event, though I politely declined. I wasn't sure I'd ever want to celebrate anything in that ballroom again. The wedding gifts were returned to guests with personal notes of apology. I kept the hidden camera though, as evidence for the trial, and maybe as a reminder of what my instincts had saved me from. Claire asked me once if I regretted installing that camera. If I wished I'd just trusted Ross, given him the benefit of the doubt, gone into the marriage with faith instead of suspicion. No, I told her. My father taught me that hope isn't a strategy. You hope for the best, but you engineer for the worst. That camera was my engineering. It saved my life. 6 months after the wedding I started a new project. A non-profit organization called Foundation First, dedicated to helping victims of financial abuse and exploitation, especially people like me who'd lost their families and were vulnerable to predators who saw grief as opportunity. I used the settlement money from the civil lawsuit against Ross and Emily to fund it. Poetic justice, I thought. They tried to steal my inheritance. Instead, their crime funded a program that would protect other people from criminals like them. We offered free legal consultations, security planning, and support groups. We helped people install their own metaphorical hidden cameras, their own safety measures, their own engineering against the worst-case scenarios. I met people who'd been through variations of what I'd experienced. Adult children stealing from elderly parents, partners isolating victims from their support systems, con artists targeting the recently widowed. The methods varied, but the goal was always the same. Take everything. Leave nothing. Make the victim disappear. Foundation First helped them fight back. And it gave me a purpose beyond my own survival. A year after my wedding, I was asked to speak at a conference for domestic abuse prevention. I told my story. The whole thing. Ross, Emily, the vial, the hidden camera, the glass swap, the ballroom chaos. At the end, a woman in the audience raised her hand. What would you say to someone who thinks they might be in a similar situation but isn't sure? Who thinks maybe they're just being paranoid? I thought about Ross's gaslighting, about how he'd convinced me I was imagining things, about how close I'd come to believing him. I'd say trust your instincts, I told her. If something feels wrong, document it. Photograph it. Record it. Tell people you trust. Build your own safety measures. Because hope isn't a strategy. Engineering is. After the talk, dozens of people came up to me. They shared their own stories, their own near misses, their own moments of realizing that someone they loved was planning to destroy them. You saved my life, one woman told me, crying. I've been thinking I was crazy, but hearing your story I realize I'm not. He's doing the same things. And now I know what to do. That's when I understood why I'd survived. Not just to escape Ross and Emily, but to help other people escape their own Rosses and Emilys. To show them that you can engineer your own safety, that you can build a foundation strong enough to withstand the people who try to shake it. 2 years after my wedding, the criminal trial concluded. Ross was sentenced to 8 years for attempted poisoning and fraud. Emily got 5 years as an accessory. They appealed, of course, but the video didn't lie. The text messages didn't lie. The prescription records didn't lie. My father always said that good architecture speaks for itself. You don't need to explain a strong foundation. You can see it in how the building stands. The evidence spoke for itself. And it said exactly what I'd known all along. That Ross and Emily Simons had tried to destroy me. And that I'd been ready for them. I still live in my parents' Victorian house in Cambridge. I restored the front porch last year, using the techniques my father taught me. Making it safe. Making it strong. Making it mine. Sometimes I think about what would have happened if I hadn't installed that camera. If I'd walked into that reception trusting Ross completely. If I'd raised that poison champagne glass to my lips and drank. I'd be gone. Disappeared into a conservatorship. Declared mentally incompetent. My assets transferred to Ross and Emily. My voice silenced. My parents' legacy stolen. Everything my father built. Destroyed by people who saw grief as weakness and trust as opportunity. But I'm not gone. I'm here. Standing on a foundation my father built and I've reinforced. Running an organization that helps other people build their own foundations. Living proof that engineering beats hope. That planning beats trust. That sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself is assume the worst and prepare for it. I haven't dated since Ross. People ask if I will. If I can. If I'll ever trust anyone again. I don't know yet. Maybe someday I'll meet someone who understands that trust has to be earned. That access to my life, my home, my heart requires more than charm and promises. that I come with safety measures built in because I've learned what happens when you don't have them. But I'm not in a hurry. I'm 34 now. I have my work, my house, my organization, my purpose. I have the foundation my father built and the strength I've added to it. I have the knowledge that I can protect myself, that I can see danger coming, that I can engineer my way out of disaster. That champagne glass was supposed to be the end of my story. Ross and Emily had written that ending for me. Drugged, incapacitated, declared incompetent, disappeared. But I rewrote the ending. I switched the glasses. I played the video. I exposed the conspiracy in front of 200 witnesses. I sent Ross to prison and Emily right behind him. And I built something better than what they tried to destroy. Something stronger. Something that helps other people survive their own near misses. My father used to say, Lavern, the strongest buildings are the ones that have been tested. The ones that have weathered storms and stayed standing. Those are the structures you can trust. I've been tested. I've weathered the storm. And I'm still standing. That's my ending. Not the one Ross and Emily wrote. The one I engineered for myself. If you're reading this, if you're watching this, if you're hearing my story and recognizing pieces of your own life in it, listen to me. Document everything. Trust your instincts. Build your safety measures. Tell people you trust what's happening. Don't let anyone convince you that caution is paranoia. Because someday you might be standing at your own head table, watching your own glass being poisoned, with only your preparation standing between you and disaster. And when that moment comes, you'll be glad you installed your own hidden camera. Whatever form that takes. You'll be glad you engineered for the worst, even while you were hoping for the best. That's the lesson Ross and Emily taught me, though they never intended to. The lesson I'm passing on to you now. The lesson that saved my life and might someday save yours. Hope isn't a strategy, but engineering is. Build your foundation strong. Test it. Reinforce it. And when someone tries to shake it, you'll be ready. Because you'll be standing on solid ground. The kind that doesn't crumble. The kind your father built or you built yourself or someone who loved you helped you build. The kind that holds. No matter what. That's my story. That's what happened at the wedding where my groom spiked my champagne. And his mother fainted when I played the footage. That's how I survived. How I'm still surviving. How I'll keep surviving. And if you need help building your own foundation, Foundation First is here. Because we all deserve to stand on solid ground. We all deserve to be safe. We all deserve to engineer our own happy endings. Even when someone else has written us a different finale. If this story resonated with you, please share it. You never know who might need to hear it. Who might be standing at their own head table right now, wondering if their instincts are right. This could be the story that saves them. Hit that like button. Subscribe. Comment below if you've ever had a gut feeling that saved you. Let's build a community that looks out for each other. That believes women when they say something feels wrong. That understands caution isn't paranoia. It's engineering. Stay safe out there. And remember, hope for the best but engineer for the worst.